She stood at the edge of my dock with her hands on her hips, sunglasses low on her nose and that fake clipboard shaking like it meant something. "You're not allowed to use this dock," she barked. I was barefoot, holding a fishing rod and coffee, staring at her like she'd just climbed out of the lake herself. "This is private property," I said. She didn't even flinch. "Exactly. And you're violating HOA Code 4B. No unapproved structures on shared waterfronts." Shared? That word hit weird. I looked behind her. Empty shoreline. Not a soul in sight. "This dock's been here since '93, I said, keeping my voice low. "My dad built it with his bare hands." She flipped the clipboard around like it was a badge. "We had a meeting last month, voted unanimously. The dock has to go and your cabin needs inspection." I blinked. My what needs what? She pointed up the slope at my place. "You'll need to vacate by Friday. If not, we'll tow everything off." "The property?" She actually smiled. It wasn't even 9 a.m., and this woman was trying to evict me off a place I'd been coming to since I was 6. "You don't even live here," I said. She took a step closer. "I'm the acting chair of the HOA for Lakeside West. That gives me full authority over rule enforcement, even for squatters." I laughed. Not a nervous laugh. The kind of laugh you let out when someone just throws a brick through your memory. She called me a squatter. On land I'd spent half my life rebuilding after my father passed. But I didn't argue. I just sipped my coffee and looked at the rusted padlock she'd already put on the gate up the hill. That was her mistake, because she had no idea who really owned that gate, or the land behind it, or the whole damn shoreline she was standing on, and I wasn't going to tell her yet. I waited until she was out of sight before I walked up the path. Sure enough, a bright orange notice was stapled to the wooden post outside the cabin. HOA code violation. Immediate compliance required. Underneath, in sloppy print, unauthorized structure, potential fines, $500 day. She really went for it. The funny part? There was no official HOA in this part of the lake. There used to be years ago. But the original association disbanded after most of the old families sold off their lots. My dad had bought the whole west side back when everyone else thought the land was worthless, swampy, too far out. Now, with prices tripled in Lakeside, becoming prime, people like her were crawling back. I went inside and pulled out the folder. The deed, survey maps, county letters, even a dusty notarized letter signed by the last HOA president, dissolving the association back in 2009. My name was on every lot west of the lake, even the part where she'd parked her golf cart, but I wasn't going to confront her yet, because the camera I installed last summer had already picked her up, cutting the lock on my shed, peeking through my cabin windows, spray painting over, my old sign that read private property, no trespassing. She wanted a fight, but she thought I was just a quiet guy with a beard and an old truck. She didn't know I spent 6 years in logistics for the Army, didn't know I helped rebuild towns, track corruption, and handle military records for land ownership in disaster. Yours. She picked the wrong squatter. I didn't have to wait long. That same evening, I heard tires crunching gravel outside. I stepped onto the porch, keeping the porch light off, and watched her pull up in a spotless white SUV. Someone was with her this time. 2 guys in matching shirts, clipboard in one hand, tape measure in the other. She didn't even look at me as she marched toward the dock again. "Start with the foundation," she told them, waving toward the edge of the lake like she owned it. "Measure everything. We'll use the non-compliance codes to fast-track removal." One of the guys glanced at me, clearly unsure. You sure this is part of HOA land?" She whipped around. "Yes, I'm positive. We pulled the old plats from the town office. This whole lakeside, west and north, is under the Lakeside Preservation Agreement, Section B." She was lying, boldly, and then she made it worse. "This cabin's under HOA lien as of tomorrow morning," she said loud enough for me to hear. "Once we file the paperwork, we can initiate possession proceedings." I walked down slowly. "You're not touching that dock," I said quietly. She turned, smug and ready. "Or what?" I held up my phone. Hit play. There she was, on video. The day before, cutting the lock on my gate, Trespassing, vandalizing. Funny how you think you're running things, I said, when the sheriff's office has already reviewed this footage. Her smile faded a little. One of the guys shifted on his feet. And I don't know what plat you pulled, I added, pulling the manila folder from under my arm. But this one's signed by the county registrar, and it shows I own everything from the dock to where you're standing. For the first time, she looked unsure, then angry. Then, "This isn't over," she hissed, turning back to her SUV. "You're going to regret this." But as her tires spun gravel on the way out, I saw what she didn't. The real county surveyor had just pulled in at the far end of the road, and he wasn't here to back her up. The county surveyor, Mr. Harris, stepped out of his truck, adjusting his ball cap as he looked around. He gave me a nod like we'd known each other for years, which technically we had. He was the same guy who walked the property with my dad back in 2006, the day we redrew the boundary lines. "You weren't kidding," he said, glancing toward the fresh tire tracks. "She's been filing complaints all week. Said a squatter was illegally occupying protected land. She ever show you any documents?" He chuckled. "Only a blurry copy of a decades-old plat map with half the West side missing." I told her it looked like something pulled off a Craigslist ad. We walked toward the dock. I handed him the folder. He flipped through the pages slowly, nodding with every turn. Official seals, original plats, proof of transfer. A quiet whistle escaped his lips. "You own every inch from that tree line to the north edge," he said. "And if anyone's violating codes, it's her. That preservation agreement she keeps waving around, it expired 5 years ago." That's when we both looked down and saw the spray paint again. New this time. Across the base of the dock, someone had written HOA repo property in thick red lines. She'd been back. And she wasn't just bluffing anymore. I didn't say anything, just pulled out my phone again. Another camera angle. Another clip. This time, her SUV at 2:47 a.m. stepping out in slippers, holding a can of paint. Mr. Harris gave a low sigh. "This is straight-up criminal mischief," I nodded. "Think the sheriff's gonna need more than just a warning this time?" But it was what he said next that threw me off. "She's not just acting like she owns this place," he muttered. "She's trying to sell it." I froze. "What do you mean, sell it?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper, an online listing, printed. "For sale. Lakeside West investment property. Multi-lot potential. 1.2. There was a picture of my dock and my cabin. She was listing land she didn't own. To buyers who didn't know they were walking into a fraud. I didn't wait. I called. The number on the listing that night, a man answered. Smooth voice like he practiced sounding rich. Claimed his name was Tom. Said he was working with the property manager of Lakeside West to close on a bulk sale deal. Said the land had pending approval for a lakeside development and that structures on site would be cleared before title transfer. "So," I asked, "you're planning to bulldoze the cabin?" He laughed. "Of course. No one's living there." I paused. Then I said, "I'm living there." Silence. "You're who?" he asked, suddenly nervous. I hung up. The next morning, 2 SUVs rolled up before sunrise. A man and a woman in business casual stepped out with clipboards and boots way too clean for lake property. I stayed back and watched from the tree line. They walked the dock, took photos of the cabin, and talked to each other like I didn't exist. Then I heard it. She said the current guy is just a holdover squatter. The woman whispered. "It'll all be cleared in 2 weeks." My jaw clenched. She wasn't just bold. She was running a full-blown scam using fake HOA authority to grab land and flip it for profit, betting I wouldn't fight back. I stepped out before they could leave. No yelling, no threats, just the folder again, ownership papers, survey maps, sheriff's report number, and the gold one, my dad's final notarized transfer document, with his signature and mine. "I suggest you contact the sheriff before you write any checks," I said, "because the woman you're dealing with trespassed on private land, tampered with surveillance, and is about 2 days away from getting arrested." They didn't say much, just stared, then got in their cars and left. Later that night, I parked my truck behind a neighbor's shed and waited, and sure enough, she came back, flashlight in one hand, spray paint in the other. She made it all the way to the porch before the cruiser lights lit up the trees. Sheriff Langston stepped out, slow and steady. "Evening, Karen," he said, and the look on her face, when she turned around and saw him, holding my folder, that was the first time she didn't have anything to say. I didn't wait. I called the number on the listing that night. A man answered, smooth voice like he practiced sounding rich, claimed his name was Tom, said he was working with the property manager of Lakeside West to close on a bulk sale deal, said the land had pending approval for a lakeside development and that structures on site would be cleared before title transfer. "So," I asked, "you're planning to bulldoze the cabin?" He laughed. "Of course. No one's living there." I paused. Then I said, "I'm living there." Silence. "You're who?" he asked, suddenly nervous. I hung up. The next morning, 2 SUVs rolled up before sunrise. A man and a woman in business casual stepped out with clipboards and boots, way too clean for lake property. I stayed back and watched from the tree line. They walked the dock, took photos of the cabin, and talked to each other like I didn't exist. Then I heard it. She said the current guy is just a holdover squatter. The woman whispered, "It'll all be cleared in 2 weeks." My jaw clenched. She wasn't just bold. She was running a full-blown scam using fake HOA authority to grab land and flip it for profit, betting I wouldn't fight back. I stepped out before they could leave. No yelling, no threats, just the folder again, ownership papers, survey maps, sheriff's report number, and the gold one, my dad's final notarized transfer document with his signature and mine. "I suggest you contact the sheriff before you write any checks," I said. "Because the woman you're dealing with trespassed on private land, tampered with surveillance, and is about 2 days away from getting arrested." They didn't say much, just stared, then got in their cars and left. Later that night, I parked my truck behind a neighbor's shed and waited, and sure enough, she came back, flashlight in one hand, spray paint in the other. She made it all the way to the porch before the cruiser lights lit up the trees. Sheriff Langston stepped out, slow and steady. "Evening, Karen," he said, and the look on her face, when she turned around and saw him, holding my folder, that was the first time she didn't have anything to say. I stared at that rusted sign for a long time. It didn't match anything in my records. My father never mentioned a Phase 2, and I had every official document since, the 80s. But this sign, it looked real, a stamped county seal, faded but there, and a signature scratched across the bottom I couldn't quite read. I took a photo and sent it to Mr. Harris. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. "Where did you find that?" he asked, voice low. "Buried behind the south fence line, near the old shed." There was a pause. "That seal's real," he said. "But here's the thing. That expansion was never finalized. The paperwork was started but canceled after 3 board members withdrew. It shouldn't even exist out there. Someone had to plant that sign to make it look like the HOA still had jurisdiction." I felt it hit me all at once. She wanted someone to find it. That whole act, getting caught, screaming at the sheriff, playing the fool. Maybe it wasn't the end of her game. Maybe it was cover, a distraction. I drove straight to the county office the next day, folder in hand, and asked to pull archived HOA filings from 2009. The clerk raised an eyebrow but complied. It didn't take long to find it. The HOA expansion was proposed by 3 names. One I recognized, Karen's ex-husband, and the other 2, sitting board members still active in the Lakeside North Development Group, which meant the scam was bigger than one woman pretending to have power. She had help, and worse. She had paperwork that almost looked legal. That afternoon, I got a voicemail. No name. Just a calm male voice. "You're digging where you shouldn't. Drop the charges or we'll find a way to prove your deed's invalid." Click. That's when I knew this wasn't about paint or property lines anymore. It was about control. A land grab years in the making. They thought I'd fold like the others before me. But they forgot who my father was. And they never knew who I became after he died. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared. Because I was angry. Angry that someone thought they could rewrite history, bury truth under paperwork, and bully their way into legacy land like it was some real estate chessboard. I went back to the cabin, pulled out the old green lockbox from under the floorboards. My dad's box. Inside, the usual. Keys, photos, a faded Marine Corps medal. But underneath, folded twice and wrapped in a plastic sleeve, was something I hadn't seen in years. The land trust letter, signed by Judge Ronald K. Bell, dated March 9, 2 weeks after the HOA Phase 2 filing. It confirmed the West Lakeside parcels were moved into a protective family trust after my mom passed, immune from annexation, unless overturned in court. It was bulletproof. But the names on that failed expansion plan, Karen's ex, the 2 HOA, board members, and one more I hadn't noticed before, were all listed as present at that meeting. And the kicker, the judge who signed my father's trust, was the same judge whose name they forged on the bogus HOA approval sign I'd found, near the fence. They weren't just trying to reclaim the land. They were trying to undo history. I scanned everything, sent copies to my lawyer, the sheriff's office, and Mr. Harris. But it still wasn't enough. This wasn't a case that would die quietly in a back office. It needed light. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I uploaded everything, documents, maps, surveillance footage, and that voicemail, to a private folder and sent it to a friend who worked in local news. A guy who owed me a favor from way back when I helped him track a stolen fishing boat across state lines. He called me 2 hours later. "Are you sure you want to go public with this?" "If I don't," I said, "they'll keep doing it to someone else." 2 days later, the story broke. Veteran landowner targeted in HOA scam, entire lakeside community at risk. It spread faster than I expected. Reddit, Facebook, YouTube. Everyone had a Karen story, and mine hit every nerve. Especially when they saw the security footage, her yelling, her sneaking, her painting. But what really lit people up was the voicemail. "You're digging where you shouldn't." People don't like threats. And within 24 hours, the sheriff's office got 3 more complaints from neighbors who'd been harassed, fined, or coerced into selling, and one of them had secretly recorded a meeting. In it, Karen's ex-husband said something that sealed their fate. If we get the west side under control, the rest of the lake falls into line. They weren't managing a neighborhood, they were running a hostile takeover.